at many bitter founts her fever slakes, halts at strange taverns by the weight of feast, resumes her load, and painful progress makes back to the east. Masonry, by means of a series of dramatic representations, is intended to furnish those who care to discover its purport and to take advantage of the hints it throws out in allegorical form, with an example and with instructions by which our return to the East may be accelerated. It refers to no architecture of a mundane kind, but to the architecture of the soul's life. It is not in itself a religion, but rather a dramatized and intensified form of religious processes inculcated by every religious system in the world. For there is no religion but teaches the lesson of the necessity of bodily purification of our first degree, none but emphasizes that of the second degree, that mental, moral and spiritual developments are essential and will lead to the discovery of a certain secret center where truth abides in fullness, and that center is a point within a circle of our own nature from which no man or mason can ever err, for it is the divine kingdom latent within us all, into which we have as yet failed to enter. And there is none but insists upon the supreme lesson of self-sacrifice and mystical death to the things of this world so graphically portrayed in our third degree, none but indicates that in that hour of greatest darkness the light of the primal divine spark within us is never wholly extinguished, and that by loyalty to that light, by patience and by perseverance, time and circumstances will restore to us the genuine secrets, the ultimate truths and realities of our own nature. We are here, Masonry teaches, as it were in captivity, by the waters of Babylon and in a strange land, and our doctrine truly tells us that the richest harmonies of this life are as nothing in comparison with the songs of Zion, and that, even when we are installed into the highest eminences this world or the craft may offer, it were better that our right hand should forget its cunning and that we should fling the illusory treasures of this transitory world behind our backs, than in all our doings fail to remember the Jerusalem that lies beyond. Our teaching is purposely veiled in allegory and symbol, and its deeper import does not appear upon the surface of the ritual itself. This is partly in correspondence with human life itself and the world we live in, which are themselves but allegories and symbols of another life and the veils of another world, and partly intentional also, so that only those who have reverent and understanding minds may penetrate into the more hidden meaning of the doctrine of the craft. The deeper secrets in Masonry, like the deeper secrets of life, are heavily veiled, are closely hidden. They exist concealed beneath a great reservation, but whoso knows anything of them knows also that they are many and valuable, and that they are disclosed only to those who act upon the hint given in our lectures: seek and ye shall find, ask and ye shall have, knock and it shall be opened unto you. The search may be long and difficult, but great things are not acquired without effort and search, but it may be affirmed to the candidate who is properly prepared, in a much fuller sense than we conventionally attach to that expression. There are doors leading from the craft that, when knocked, will assuredly open and admit him to places and to knowledge he at present treks little of. For him, too, who would enter upon the greater initiations, the same rule applies as that which was symbolically represented upon his first entrance into the order, but this time it will no longer be a symbol, but a realistic fact. He will find, I mean, that a drawn sword is always threatening in front of him, and that a cable tow is still around his neck. Danger, indeed, awaits the candidate who would rush precipitately and in a state of moral unfitness into the deeper mysteries of his being, which are indeed serious, solemn and awful, but, on the other hand, for him who has once entered upon the path of light it is moral suicide to turn back. And now, brethren, to bring to an end this brief and imperfect survey of the deeper meaning and purposes of our craft, I pray that what is now spoken may help to prove to some of you a further restoration to that light which is, at all times, the predominant wish of our hearts. It rests with ourselves whether Masonry remains for us what upon its outward and superficial side appears to be merely a series of symbolic rites, or whether we allow those symbols to pass into our lives and become realities therein. whatever formalities we may have gone through in connection with our admission into the order, we cannot be said to have been regularly initiated into Masonry so long as we regard the craft as merely an incident of social life and treat its ceremonies as but rites of an archaic and perfunctory nature. The craft, as I have already suggested, was given out to the world, from more secret sources still, as a great experimenter and means of grace, and as a great opportunity for those who cared to avail themselves of what is little known and little taught outside certain sanctuaries of concealment. It was intended to furnish forth an epitome or synopsis, in dramatic form, of the spiritual regeneration of man, and to throw out hints and suggestions that might lead those capable of discerning its deeper purpose and symbolism into of still deeper initiations than the merely superficial ones enacted in our lodges. For, as on the external side of the order we may be called to occupy positions of honor and office in the Provincial Grand Lodge, or may enter other Masonic grades outside the craft, so also upon its internal side there are eminences to which we may be called that, whilst offering us no social distinction and no visible advancement, are yet really the true prizes, the most valuable attainments, of Masonic desire. To this goal all may attain who truly seek to do so and who prepare the way for themselves by appropriating the truths lying beneath the superficial allegory and the symbolic veils of the craft teaching. And since there seems today a genuine and widespread desire on the part of many members of the order to enter into a fuller understanding of what the order itself conceals rather than reveals, I feel I should not be discharging my duties as a master in the craft did I not take advantage of that position to share with them some measure at least of what I have been able to glean for myself. But, finally, I must ask you to remember that, in accordance with the general design of our system, every master of a lodge is but a symbol and a substitution, and that behind him, and behind all other the grand officers of the Masonic hierarchy, there stands the great white head, the great initiator and grand master of all true Masons throughout the universe, whether members of our craft or not. To whom let us all bow in gratitude for the invaluable gift accorded to us in this our the order, and to whose protection, and to whose deeper enlightening guidance into its deeper mysteries, I recommend you all. Chapter 2. Masonry as a Philosophy. Signs are not wanting that a higher Masonic consciousness is awakening in the craft. Members of the order are gradually, and here and there, becoming alive to the fact that much more than meets the eye and ear lies beneath the surface of Masonic doctrine and symbols. They are beginning to think for themselves instead of taking the face value of things for granted, and, as their thought develops, facts that previously remain unperceived assume prominence and significance. They discern the Masonic system to be something deeper than a code of elementary morality such as all men are expected to observe whether formally Masons or not. They reflect that the phenomenal growth of the craft is scarcely accountable for upon the supposition that modern speculative Masonry perpetuates nothing more than the private associations that once existed in connection with the operative builder's trade. They recognize that there can be no peculiar virtue or interest in continuing to imitate the customs of ancient trade guilds for the mere sake of so doing, or of keeping on foot a costly organization for teaching men the elementary symbolism of a few building tools, supplemented by a considerable amount of social conviviality. Upon a little thought it becomes pretty obvious that our third degree in the great central legend that forms the climax of the craft system cannot have, and can never have had, any direct or practical bearing upon, or connection with, the trade of the operative Mason. It may be urged that we have our great charity system and that the social side of our proceedings is a valuable and humanizing asset. Granted, but other people and other societies are philanthropic and social as well as we, and a secret society is not necessary to promote such ends, which are merely supplemental to the original purpose of the order. The discernment of such facts as these, then, suggests to us that the craft has not yet entered into the full heritage of understanding its own system and that side matters connected with Masonry which we have long emphasized so strongly, valuable in their own way as they are not after all the primary and proper work of the order. The work of the order is to initiate into certain secrets and mysteries, and obviously if the order fails to expound its own secrets and mysteries and so to confer real initiations as distinguished from passing candidates through certain formal ceremonies, it is not fulfilling its original purpose whatever other incidental good it may be doing. Now as these facts are the basis upon which this lecture proceeds, let me at the outset make my first point by stating that as the progress in the craft of every brother admitted into its ranks is by gradual, successive stages, in like manner the understanding of the Masonic system and doctrine is also a matter of gradual development. Stated in the simplest terms possible, the theory of Masonic progress is that every member admitted to the order enters in a state of darkness and ignorance as to what Masonry teaches, and that later on he is supposed to be brought to light and knowledge. Putting it in other terms, he enters the craft symbolically as a rough ashlar, and it is his business so to develop both his character and his understanding that ultimately, in virtue of what he has learned and practiced, he may be as a finished and perfect cube. Now the understanding of the Masonic scheme tends to develop upon precisely similar lines. Its meaning is not discernible all at once, and unless our minds are properly prepared and our understandings carefully trained, they are unlikely ever to participate in the real secrets and mysteries of Masonry at all, however often we may watch the performance of external ceremonial or however proficient we may be in memorizing the rituals and instruction lectures. The first stage, the first conception of what Masonry involves, is concerned merely with the surface value of the doctrine, with an acquaintance with the literal side of the imparted knowledge which we all obtain upon entering the craft. Beyond this stage the vast majority of Masons, it is to be feared, never passes. This is the stage of knowledge in which the craft is regarded as a social, semi-public, semi-secret community to which it is agreeable and advantageous to belong for sociable or even for ulterior purposes, in which the goal of T. Mason's ambition is to attain office and high preferment and to wear a breast full of decorations, in which he takes a literal, superficial and historic view of the subject matter of the doctrine, in which ability to perform the ceremonial work with dignity and effectiveness and to know the instruction catechisms by heart, so that not a syllable is wrongly rendered, is deemed the height of Masonic proficiency, and where, after discharging these functions with a certain degree of credit, his idea is often to have the lodge closed as speedily as may be and get away to the relaxation of the festive board. Now all these things belong to what may be called the very rough ashlar stage of the Masonic conception. I am not, of course, alluding to any individual Mason. I confess frankly to having come within this category myself, and I think we may agree that we have all passed through the phase I have described, for the simple reason that we knew nothing better and had no one able to teach us something better. Let us not complain. If we look back upon the progress of the craft during the last 150 years we cannot but congratulate ourselves upon the enormous, if gradual, strides made in Masonic progress and decorum even in the rough ashlar stage of our conception of it. Anyone familiar with the records of old lodges will have been brought into close touch with times when almost every element of reverence and dignity seems to have been lacking. Lodges were held in the public rooms of taverns. Whatever official furniture decorated these primitive temples, court bots and churchwardens figured largely among the unauthorized equipment. In one of the great London galleries there hangs a famous picture called Night by the great artist and moralist of his age, Hogarth. His purpose was to depict a characteristic night scene in the streets of London as they appeared in his time. Among the typical specimens of depravity haunting those ill-lit streets, the great artist has held up to the derision of all time the figure of a Freemason staggering home drunk, still wearing his apron and being assisted by the taller of the lodge. No true Mason can regard this picture without a burning sense of shame, and without registering a resolution to redeem the craft from this stigma. We have, I hope, got past such things as these. We have awakened to some sense of dignity and self-reverence. The craft is well governed by its higher authorities, and individual lodges take a pride in providing proper temples and in conducting their assemblies with due regard to the solemnity of Masonic doctrine. May the order never relapse into the primitive and chaotic condition from which it has emerged. But this improvement in matters of external deportment, great and welcome as it is not enough to prevent the order settling down into a state of self-satisfaction.